ladies and gentlemen. We're now at the fourth annual Linux Peter conference in St. Petersburg. My name is Vasily Tolstoy, and I'm a member of programming committee of this conference. And together, right to the right of me, is Mr. Lennart Poettering. Hello. Lennart, you are second time at this conference.
Yes.
Which is great. It's a pleasure for us.
It's a pleasure for me.
And you have been giving talk yesterday evening. Can you tell us what it was about?
My talk yesterday was about something I call portable services, which is, I'm working on systemd, the service manager that is like a core component of all of today's big Linux distributions. And I'm trying to bring service management to the next level. So we looked around and figured out what's going on else in this world, and that's obviously containers. And containers do some things like sandboxing and resource bundling, and we thought, in particular, seeing lots of use cases how people use our stuff and use containers, we came to the conclusion that some of these things, resource bundling and sandboxing, would also make a lot of sense to have in service management. And we found, I think, a very simple, minimalistic way to make this available in current systemd versions, and that was what my talk was about. It's my intention to make this more visible, because I think that many use cases where people currently use containers are probably better covered with portable services. Not to say that all use cases are like that, but I think a lot of them would be.
Actually, I attended your talk and understood how it could be done, and it looks like crystal clear, absolutely reasonable. The only thing which still remains as a question for me is what is the use case for the service as a separate container? It looks like you're buying a car and saying, and by the way, you can every time, as you wish, you can remove the steering wheel, bring it and place it home on the kitchen table, and it will fit. Why anybody would need the thing which is system service? You see how the logic goes, which should be part of the system, like a building block of it, to be easy, movable, independent, and started and killed without artifacts.
That's a very good question. So the main use case that always came to me is where people inside of my company and other companies came to me with was storage related, right? Like where people were developing storage software, like RAID stuff, these kind of low-level storage stuff, which generally means a lot of exposure to the host operating system, right? Like they want to be able to enumerate hardware, manage hardware, to maybe sometimes even load kernel modules and things like that, which is it's very, very close to the system, right? On the other hand, they also want to make themselves somewhat independent from the system by being able to use resource bundling, right? By being able to ship their code and all the dependencies, whatever that needs, the web components to make it configurable and these kind of things, in one image, right? So what Portable Service tries to do is try to cover that thing better, because so far what those people did is they use Docker, right? And if you use Docker, and then you get all the sandboxing, all this kind of stuff, like it's redesigned for isolation. It's not designed for integration, but for isolation. And then they turn off all the isolation, and then there's no clear semantic with that. So this was the original use case that I had in mind, because I knew these discussions inside of my company and other companies going on. But I think it's very useful outside of that. Like I know, for example, embedded devices who build basically like a fridge or something, and they want to be able to deploy a concept of apps on that, right? Like it's not so much user-facing apps necessarily, but just extensions to the base OS. But given that these are embedded devices, IoT devices, they tend to be much more low level than what we usually consider, right? Like they need some kind of low level device access, right? And for those cases as well, I think this is a really, really good choice, because it allows apps a lot closer integration with the underlying operating system, because they can get access, even though they do sandboxing, they also can get access to any kind of device that might be there, which is not the use case that containers were built for. Well, containers are really more about I don't know, the web, like the internet, like where you have where most of the communication happens with other services, not so much with local hardware. But I also know about companies who actually already want to deploy them, including a really big international cloud company who actually want to use portable services in a way where traditional containers would probably also work, right? But they want something more minimal. Because I mean, what you currently have with containers is that you have another layer on top of, like it's another level of service management. They call it microservices for a reason, after all. On top of the low-level service management, you need to figure out what you actually want, right? Like, do you want one layer for the low-level stuff, another layer on top? Some people do, because the upper layer gives them serious benefits of deploying and things like that. Or do you just decide, oh, let's just all do it in the lower level and use portable service for everything, and then because they already have the way of deploying these images anyway, so that the classic container environments, Docker and Kubernetes doesn't give them that much anymore. So yeah, the primary focus definitely on more low-level system stuff, but it's a very generic tool, and people can use it any way they want, and they can use it to deploy web stuff as well. It's not what I'm trying to push people towards but it's up to them, whatever people want to make use for it. But I mean, I just want to make clear, I'm not trying to be in competition with the container stuff, right? Like the mind share the Docker has is just too big, right? Like it's a political game that I don't want to be in, right? Like it's outside of my focus of interest. I'm not a container person that much. I'm an operating systems person, and I'm trying to fix the problems that come to me, not the problems that other people might have. But yeah, I hope that makes clear a little bit how I position this, right? Like that it's something, yeah, a little bit lower level than containers, right? Like containers can do deployment and cluster stuff and all the things upwards. I think portable services are a really good fit for everything downwards.
It's very interesting, especially that considering that at this conference, this very one, if I remember correctly, yesterday we had a talk about exposing the hardware into the Kubernetes containers, and I was asking the speaker the same questions in different way about how it isn't it making the containers to glue it up to the hardware. So it seems that there is a movement, like you want to something be sandboxes, isolated, containerized, but still have access to low-level features.
Yeah, the guy who did the talk was actually doing this more from he's from Alexi, not from Kubernetes, by the way. So his kind of containers are usually these kind of containers that are more like a virtual machine, right? Like they run their own init system inside. So the virtualized environment is actually an operating system of their own, and for them it makes a load of sense. Like much like you can pass through hardware to a VM, you might also want to pass hardware through to one of these containers, because in many ways they act like real systems. But yeah, it's still a different use case than what I have in mind. Right?
Yes, but just I see some convergence between them. So and this is good. So there is a trend, and it's good to be in the trend. Of course, I have the two, as you are one of the important persons in the Linux world. There's and you work in Red Hat. I have the two natural questions for you. Quite different ones, but still. First is how it feels to work in IBM.
Well, I mean, it's still a long time out. I think December 2019, when that actually takes place. So right now I'm not working for IBM. I'm working for Red Hat.
So you can enjoy the last 3 days.
Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to feel about this. Also, I mean, I'm not involved in management or anything like this. So I'm so far, like as a remotee, working from Germany, I'm so far removed from all the business parts of IBM, and I'm pretty confident until any of these changes, if they come, hits me, it's going to be another couple of years, I think. Like even if we joined IBM, I'm pretty sure they're not going to change. I mean, that's at least what they say. Anything right away. I'm pretty sure eventually it will probably be integrated closer and closer with IBM. But until then, I think it's probably as good as it is right now.
And what do you expect in more general terms of how this integration may go? If you can say without disclosing any.
I don't know. I don't think anyone really knows what this really means.
You see, you can imagine probably, Bob, from your own experience, which parts would be cut and which parts will integrate and which will be left as a separate, semi-separate activity.
Well, I'm pretty sure that IBM had no interest in systemd, but also no negative interest in systemd either, right? Like, so I don't think they care very much about systemd. So for my personal area of work, I don't think it means anything in the short term. I'm pretty sure there are other groups at Red Hat where the duplication of what Red Hat's doing and what IBM's doing is bigger, right? Like, because they work on similar projects. So I figure there you will probably integrate quicker or compete quicker, or well, I don't know how that will play out. But at least for the area that I'm working on myself, I think we're probably the least ones to notice any changes, right? I think somebody needs to maintain the init system of the operating system, and so as long as IBM Red Hat will do operating systems, probably our team will probably do something.
I know that the IBM does a lot of things with Linux already. It's a long time user of Linux, at least. Yeah, so it would be, but again, it's the future. We can't guess now what will happen. Which fish will eat which fish inside IBM. But it's interesting. In any way, if I remember correctly, it's a Chinese proverb, which is a Chinese curse actually. So let you live in interesting times.
I figure next time at this conference we'll know a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. Another thing, also rather big and interesting in Linux is this code of conduct thing. It seems that there's kind of informal competition, which group accepts the code of conduct the less pays for the beer, whatever. So they all accepting new version of codex of conduct. The more formal, serious, without joking, official, a bit leftish, as you expect. And the decision of Linus to take a step down from the helm of the process of the kernel maintaining is also part of the picture, in a sense. Can you comment on this?
I think that Linus left for a couple of months didn't really change anything, because I mean he's not the only one who's like this. I mean, I have been a victim of this bullshit, yeah, like I mean I'm not participating in the kernel community for reasons. I never reply to kernel mailing list, like if something is CC to kernel mailing list, because they do not, like the community is not healthy in my opinion, and I don't like being threatened or yelled at or anything like this. Now I have the luxury, I just don't have to care, right? Like if they send me a message, I'm not like, if it's public and if it has a potential of being just this, becoming a magnet for loud discussions, then I'm just saying, yeah, I'm out of this. I don't have to have these kind of discussions, so I don't. That is a luxury that I have because we have so much stuff to work on. I don't have to participate in this. I'm pretty sure a lot of people do not have this luxury, and I'm also sure that the behavior of Linus was not necessary, and I'm also sure that Linus is not the only one like this, and yeah.
It's again, for me, when I was discussing with other guys, the same stuff, and they agree that it falls in a kind of a picture. So we should do something with the well, not with the existing conduct, but to declare what are the rules. And the Linus saying that probably should rethink what I was doing. It's a step in the same direction.
Well, I mean, I
can change tomorrow, but I really
I'm pretty sure that the old system did work, right? Like, because I did get death threats and I did get all these insults, and nobody did care about this, right? Like, I mean, I have about 6 months ago or something, after like 3 years of not talking to the kernel people publicly. I mean, it's not that I'm not talking to kernel people, right? Like I am, but not on public mailing lists, right? And only to the people that I know are fine people, because they do have them. But about 6 months ago or something, I did participate in a couple of threads, which weren't on LKML itself, but on auxiliary, like on other mailing lists, also from the kernel people. Took like a day or something, and I got stuff where people told me to kill myself, right? And this is just
nice people.
Yeah, it's 9
by the way,
ago.
go kill yourself. Okay.
And it's just 9 months ago, and then it took the maintainer of that mailing list, or the guy who's responsible for that subsystem that the mailing list was for, it took him like a week to reply, oh, please don't do this. I can tell you that in the systemd community, we will, if somebody tells anyone to kill himself, then yeah, that's the end. We'll block you from the mailing list. This is no way how this. We don't have to have this, right? Like, there's really no need to. So I think the kernel community has a problem, and I'm pretty sure that the old system doesn't work, right? Like the old code of conduct. I can't tell you what the right thing is. I'm very much prefer hacking over dealing with these social issues. I can tell you so much. I just acknowledge them that they're there, and I pity those who have to deal with that, who come from a culture where like being insulted and these kind of things is a big problem, like Asian countries in particular. And I am happy that first of all, for some reason, it doesn't hit me too much if people tell me I'm an awful person. I mean, it's always just a question, like we always want to know why we managed to push systemd through, right? Like, because we were in no way the first ones trying this, right? Like there were lots of inner systems before us, but it was systemd the one that actually got in all the distributions, right? And the reasons why, like the explanation that I have why we managed to do this, that we actually did do all the talks, and that we for all the negativity we got back, which is like a lot, right? We just shrugged it off, right? Like, because we do care about criticism from people who we respect, but if they're random people from the internet, we don't care too much, right? Like, but I know that a lot of people are not built like that, and that's why I can, like, I don't know, the Linux community can be pretty awful, I can tell you that. And I'm not sure what the right way to fix it is. Maybe it is code of conduct, maybe it's something else. I'm very sure that the kernel code of conduct so far, like the old one, certainly did not work. But also I'm not in the position, like, you know, with all of this, I'm certainly not the one who gives good recommendations, because ultimately I'm very privileged in everything I do, right? Like I'm like a Western European English-speaking person who apparently can deal and shrug off criticism quite a bit. And if I wasn't as privileged in that regard, I'm pretty sure that the bullshit they dumped on us would be much worse. And if I had been under pressure for other reasons, I don't know, because I'm a minority of some kinds, I would have probably taken it much worse than I would have. I mean, I know a lot of people in the Linux community, in the broader open source community, who also kind of pulled back from particular communities simply because they couldn't deal with that stuff, right? All I know that for our system side of things, if somebody misbehaves and does death threats and other really awful stuff on our mailing list, on our GitHub account, we block them. Like,
I see.
I don't need that.
I see. So still, while you are not the person who tends to overreact on the things others say to you, you still think that it's a good thing to really enforce the code of conduct. It's because you see the two tendencies. One of them, the people are accepting them, like, because it seems like a new trend, but as you say, there's something behind this. You need to do something, and they're doing something. And of course, there's the opposite movement. The guys who are saying that everything was just okay before. And you are accepting those code of conduct in the line 3.8, I see that you should that you reserve the right to push me off and close my revoke my right to contribute everywhere if I, for example, behave not as you see fit out of the mailing list, just in the real world or whatever, being on vacation. And this is the threat of the free speech, freedom of thought, freedom of behavior. It doesn't care. The only code is the measure. Blah blah. You can definitely know about that. So your opinion, just want to reiterate this, is that it's the ephemeral threat. So real one is just the people really got their excessive portion of bullshit, and they quit because they don't want to deal with these aggressive guys. Huh?
I mean, it's like, you know, there are some people who apparently feel threatened now that with their method of communication they might get kicked out of the communities. But there's also the fact that I know quite a few people who do not contribute to those communities in the first place because it is the way it is. Now, if I look at the contributions from those people who are so afraid about freedom of speech, blah, 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 blah,
yes.
and overreach in this regard, and about the potential contributions from those people that I know who don't participate, I tend to prefer very much the contributions from, like, I know, for example, kernel patches that people prepared, but then had no, like, they even put them up on some Git repository, but then had no interest in going through this cesspool of LKML and fighting for it, because that's not how they wanted to spend that time, right? And I can very much sympathize with that. So if it's about those kernel patches, I very much would have seen those to become real inside of the kernel. Then I don't know.
I see your point.
It's like, you know, when Linus came back, he did this interview where he said that what made him realize that something needs to change is when he looked up, like, the kind of people that are against these kind of things, and then he figured out that he didn't want to be among that group, right? Like, he looked who else was in that group, and I think that's something that should not be underestimated.
Okay. So if the Mr. Thick-Skin Lennart Thick-Skin Poettering says that something needs to be changed, that something needs to be changed.
I guess. Well, I mean, you know, apparently my thick skin is not thick enough, though, because after all, if there's a community that people like, where it's okay to use like these death threats and all these kind of things, and they don't do anything about it, then my skin is thin enough to just not participate in that community, right?
No, I guess it's the best thickness of skin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a
golden middle.
You really need to know which fights you want to fight and which fights you don't, right? Yeah. And I know pretty well which fights to fight, I think, and which ones I just say, I don't have to have this.
Sure. Then from these deep issues, I'd like to switch to more standard ones, like what happened last year? From our previous conversation to this one, what are the news? What are the fads? What are the interesting things which fashion?
In my projects, you mean?
You can think wider. Just what I have seen, which is, this happened this year, is important.
Well, I mean, from our project's point of view, of course, portable services. I think I talked about that happened. It's of course the best thing happening to IT in the last year. But other than that, I don't know what the big trends are. I guess the blockchain's already over again. I'm curious what the next fad is going to be that people will run after. But I don't know. I kind of follow some things from the distance and others not so much. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, like I guess Kubernetes one, and I'm always watching that from the distance. I'm not a container guy, but it's of course relevant in some form to what we do. So we need to follow what's happening there. But I don't know. I have this. I have the luxury of not having to care about the broader trends, I guess, like Bitcoin or something. So actually, we did get a donation for the Systemd project from a blockchain-funded group, actually recently. So that's as much as I care about.
But the donation itself was in the normal money, or
It wasn't real money.
oh, it was real
It was
money, because
substantial money.
otherwise it will. Was prepared to joke about how long it took to proceed this donation, because this is what the issue with the different blockchain technologies, that they become slower while they actually grow. And okay, actually I cannot say anything in contrary. Because I also see that the things go evolutionary around, except that I personally feel that the people start to talk once again a bit more about the cloud. The cloud, which was the buzzword like 5+ years ago,
It's a different cloud now.
comes back again. And by the way, the Red Hat and IBM deal is also has the cloud word in its description. We want to get the cloud service.
But I'm curious, like, Open Stack was like the big thing like 2 years ago. Now it's Kubernetes. Curious what's going to be the next one, and when they will settle down. When
But the Kubernetes has a little advantage. It works. And
I'm pretty sure OpenStack worked also for some people.
Not that much. My hands-on experience of OpenStack was completely awful.
I think the health of such a project is always subject to like how many, like, I think the longer a project runs, it always runs into the risk of being too business bound, right? Like that you ultimately try to implement everything your customers want, right? And if you don't restrict yourself, then everything becomes a massive, complex, unmanageable beast, right? There's always, of course, the risk with systemd, right? Like our code base is currently about the same size as WPA supplicant, which is always something I like to have as a address of comparison, right? Like, so we are about the same size as the Wi-Fi stack, the user space Wi-Fi stack on your Linux community project, right? Like, and so even though we have the reputation in systemd always that we grow too big and have too many things integrated in our stuff, given if you actually look at the source, it's not that much, right? It's much, like a fraction of the Linux kernel, fraction of glibc, and about the size of the Wi-Fi stack. Now, I always see, like, with these big corporate projects with OpenStack and Kubernetes, they always, like, as things progress, they become too big, right? And that's, of course, like the really, really difficult problem to deal properly, right? Like, how do you manage a project that grows and becomes successful and make sure that it does not eat its children and become the next thing that's replaced instead of staying the next thing that is the next thing.
Who knows? Sometimes people say that it should be a right architecture from the very beginning, but when somebody will be born, who knows which is the right architecture from the very beginning, he'll get a halo above his head. Okay, and my last question would be the modification of a standard one. That for the guys who are thinking now to which open software project to contribute. For example, the guy who has some programming experience, of course, he's using the free software and the open software, and the guys concentrates and think, okay, I want to give something back. I'll psychologically prepared to go through this organization hassle. I'll do a piece of open source. What would be your criteria to select a project to participate in?
Well, I'd always pick a friendly one, but I mean, it's like if you contribute to the low-level projects like kernel, for example, there's always lots of politics involved, right? Like you also have to. It's not good enough to have good code. It's not good enough to have the best code even. It's all about convincing the right people, right? So I think it's always easier to like the simpler the project gets, the simpler also the politics get, I guess. I don't know.
And how one can choose the project with a simple politics scheme looking from the outside?
Well, I mean, it's always a good thing to look for friendly, like the reputation of the projects in the community, right? So I think the kernel community has not a very good reputation, I guess, but I appreciate there are lots of communities that are much happier places, I think, I know, for example, the GNOME community, in contrast to what's suggested, like the desktop people are a very friendly community. So maybe that's a good place, but then again, I don't know, like I'm pretty sure lots of web projects are also very friendly. But I don't know, if I was, like the thing is like the longer people do their stuff and the more technical it becomes, the harsher they come in the reviews, right? Like, and
yeah, it's quite natural.
So I don't know, I think like if you're young and like dealing with criticism is sometimes not the most pleasant thing in the world. So in order to keep things pleasant, I'd always pick a project where you know that the community is all right, and then if they're not happy with what you're doing, that they tell it to you in a friendly way and help you with actually fixing it. Because I mean, being a maintainer, and I'm saying that as being one, is a really hard job because it's so much work, right? Like it's 10 times harder to read code and review it than to write code, and this has a natural tendency that maintainers become like short and unfriendly in the reviews, right? And hence, if you have a friendly community and a community with lots of reviewers, you have a much better chance of having a happy life. And so I would always recommend people to do that. But ultimately, of course, everybody should work on the stuff that they're the most interested in, right? And if that's web stuff, that's web stuff. If it's low-level system stuff, that's low-level system stuff. But you have to figure out what you want, right? Like it's if you prefer tinkering with bits and bytes level, then become an OS developer. And if you like, I don't know, networked distributed systems, then it's the web for you, I think. But yeah, everything's fine.
So, young ladies and gentlemen, come to open source, the place where you basically need to be nice.
That would be the best thing. Always be nice.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, and thank you for having me here.
You're welcome.